Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, whenever you are based in the world. Welcome to another episode of Reality Shift. I'm Gabriele Romagnoli. I'm one of your hosts, and I'm here with Anandas. Anand.
Hey everybody. So excited for today.
Indeed, excited because today in these episodes we have Nanea Reeves, the CEO and co-founder of TRIPP. TRIPP is a global service that offers interactive and transformative experiences for mental and emotional well-being on actually a wide variety of devices, like from mobile, from headset, and was nominated one of the Time Magazine Best Invention of 2022. Nanea really has over 20 years of experience in digital distribution, video games, and is here with us to share her experience throughout this journey and give us a glimpse of what the future of technology and mental well-being has to offer. Nanea, it is really a pleasure to have you here with us.
I'm so happy to be here and to have this conversation with you.
We are going to talk a lot and cover many aspects of TRIPP, of your professional journey. I would like to start this by asking you, what is TRIPP, and overall, what motivated you to merge meditation and mindfulness with technology?
You know, we try to think beyond mindfulness. It's more about experience. When you look at virtual reality, it is more an experience, if anything. So I was really motivated by what are the native properties of VR and this idea of how you could use the experience of being fully immersed in an environment that is designed to be supportive and what that would look like. Some of the early VR experiences were designed to frighten you. You could create fear so easy, right? And I kept thinking, what else could you make someone feel? If logically, you're in your living room, but you're terrified to fall off a cliff, what was that about? So it was less about simulating reality for me. It was more about stimulating. But in general, so I try to stay out of the meditation sort of wrapper because I think it's a trap. It's too narrow of a band. Because if we just focused on that, I say this over and over from the beginning of the company, it's not big enough of a concept. Immediately people will think, oh, they're going to put me on a beach and there'll be a Celtic voice telling me to relax. And it's just, it's too expected. And it seemed like kind of a waste of the opportunity for me. I will say throughout my life, I've always been interested in technology. And I was like that little kid that took apart the TV to see how it would work and was always trying to figure out, like, how does this work, with curiosity and interest. And for me, playing video games actually was a very supportive escape from the physical reality of my life, which as a child was actually very complicated, very challenging. And so the ability to be able to retreat into a world where I felt like I had agency and control, and I could adopt a persona that was different from who I was in the real world and have this sense of like heroic, mission-focused mindset, I found very healing at a time where there was a lot of chaos in my life. My mother was a drug addict, and as the child of someone who I believe now she was self-medicating her mental illness, but the impact it had on me and my sisters was in early life was, very damaging, but in many ways kind of allowed me to become organically sort of my own person too, in a weird way.
Thank you for sharing that. It's a deeply personal story, and we appreciate you talking through this. this is probably one of the episodes I've looked forward the most to spend time and talk with people, because I think you talked about your early part of your life.
Yeah.
There's a middle part, and then there's TRIPP. So fill in the middle part, because people may or may not know how much of like an OG you are and how you've seen everything that's the waves that have come and gone, and you've ridden the crests and you've gone to the peaks. And so talk us through that a little bit.
Well, that playing video games actually led me to a technology career by accident. You get into wanting to understand, like, how does this work? How do I get better at it? I'm inadvertently learning network effects, etc. And I think a lot of entrepreneurial success has to do with timing and being able to say yes to just the possibility. And it's really interesting working in technology with developers, because engineers by nature are kind of hardwired to say no to stuff, or to try to figure out what's going to go wrong with this so they can code defensively. It's part of like what makes a really good developer. But I found that being able to sort of do both in my own journey really allowed me to show up in a unique way. And so I was interested in going online way before the web, and then started doing graphic design and computer work as a way to just make money as a young person, and had a friend teach me how to code websites when they first started appearing. And pretty soon she had started her own company, and I went to go work for her, and we were on a tear. We did the Sony Pictures Entertainment site. I learned a lot about information architecture and account management and scope management. And it was really fun to build this stuff. We were building Shockwave games back in the day. And at that time, I heard a lot of people say, well, no one's ever going to buy something they can't hold in their hands. It might work with a book, or I don't want to give a credit card to a website. And I went, well, what's the difference between giving it to some person in a store? Why do you have more trust with that than something that, doesn't actually have, it's very neutral in many ways, right? So it kind of got me thinking a lot about how people will lean back and say no to things. But I was really curious about, well, this is really fascinating. Like, we can buy stuff through the computer, or we can play these online games were starting to percolate then, and so when mobile came up, anyway, that web development company got purchased by E-Companies, which was a very early LA incubator. And we were this team of designers and developers that were part of the E-Companies team that we prototyped the business ideas. And we'd sit around with all these senior leaders in the company and evaluate whether they should be funded or not. And it couldn't have been like the best business school ever at that time. And there was one called E-Parties. This was back before the .com bust.
Like Excite Blue Mountain era.
Totally. And there was a company that they were doing called E-Parties, where you would click and build a party and get it sent to you. And it had kind of community elements. And I thought, I love this idea. And so I went to go run product at that. I said, I want to work on product on this. And Dave Haddad was the CEO. He was brought in. He's now president at Warner Brothers Interactive. And, and they do lots of great VR games and games in general. And I've had some awesome bosses in my career. And we launched the site, and I was sleeping under my desk. I had a picture of David Filo when he was worth $500 million. at Yahoo, like sleeping under his desk. And that was sort of the culture back then. And we launched, and then like 6 weeks later, we didn't get any traction, and E-Company shut us down. And I was devastated. Like, it was an epic failure, right? And as I was walking, they were telling us they're shutting us down. As I was walking out of the room, they pulled me aside and they said, we want you to work on this mobile game startup that Sprint's giving us. And that was something, for me, I learned something about business, that your failures don't have to define you, and that all those things I learned during that sort of year working on e-parties, how to just get live. And then Dave and I went and sold all the assets, he and I, to eToys. And I went to eToys and did the integration. So I saw sort of like the epic business failure at the very beginning of my entrepreneurial journey, and I survived it. And so maybe that has been an anchor for me to know, you got to swing for the fences, and not everything's going to work. You can't win every game. And one of my bosses, Mitch Lasky, who, has gone on to become one of the most amazing game venture capitalists at Benchmark. He funded Snap, he funded Riot, he funded Discord, First Check-In, Gaikai, the company that I was at, cloud gaming company that Sony acquired. And but Mitch was CEO of that mobile game company that after we sold the eToys assets, I went to go work at. I was employee number 4. And but he had this statement. He would say, you want to go for you want to go big, and noble failures are okay. Like, he gave us permission to fail. He said, "Now I don't."
Sounds right. Noble failures are okay.
Yeah, and he said that you want 80% of what you do to be good, and you can have, like, when you start getting into like 80% noble failures, you've got an issue. But the noble failures are really an important aspect of an innovative culture, because otherwise people are going to be too fearful of making mistakes, of losing, and so, you can see the behavior that will drive. And like, we did this thing, it was a big integration with Radio Shack at Jamdat, which was the mobile game company that Sprint gave us $1 million to start. And it was, on flip phones. And we were doing WAP games to start. We did the first multiplayer WAP game in the world. It was this game.
Wireless Access Protocol, for those of us who...
Yeah, it was a mobile browser, right?
Visual internet on mobile phones.
Totally. And it was an ASCII game where it was like rock, paper, scissors, sort of, you go, I'm going to strike high, medium, or low. But we didn't even know how to forecast it. We benchmarked on internet numbers, web numbers, and we hit our year-end numbers by noon the first day once we turned it on. And, there were only like 10 connected phones back then. I mean, there weren't even that many connected phones. But anyway, it's been a really fun journey. Jamdad ended up going public. I ran tech there. By the time we went, we got acquired by EA. When EA bought us, Mitch was in charge of mobile and EA Online, and he put me as the leader in online. And we built out a lot of the in-game entitlement systems, in-game transactions, centralized wallet. This was all pre-crypto. And again, yeah, like, I just have to say that when we started Jamdat, we would pitch it and people go, no one's ever going to play a game on their cell phone. Like, all people want to do is talk. And, they have PlayStations. And Mitch would say, oh, yeah, why don't you take out your PlayStation from your pocket right now and play a game on it? And when when we went public, the IPO tour, Mitch would take his phone out, and it was a flip phone back then. I think it was like a Motorola or something. And he had a projector on the phone and in front of all the bankers, and he just purchased a game and downloaded it. And he goes, there, I just spent $7.47. Or, like and it was mind-blowing at the time. Now we do it all the time, right? So we also had to educate people on what it meant to even access content on the phones. And we did all kinds of fun stuff out of my group. We did a multiplayer real-time game called Bejeweled, multiplayer that I think it was the only game ever in mobile that got a 10 out of 10 from IGN. And we did the first subscription product. It was on AT&T Tiger Woods Golf, and you had to triple tap like 480 times to enter your credit card in. So, and I was the first subscription product on Oculus too, right? So, but we could talk about that. Yeah. So anyway, it just goes on and on as far as like, really kind of whenever I hear someone say, oh, why would anyone watch someone else play a video game? Right. When we were at Machinima, and you just, yeah, exactly. And, Machinima, I said, Machinima has 100 million monthly active uniques. Like, apparently a lot of people want to watch other people play video games. Like, so, you have to kind of look at why do we dismiss new ideas? And I don't understand why I don't. I don't.
The question.
Yeah, I don't know.
Practices or behaviors or things you do that allow you to say yes but stay disciplined, and catch these waves. And you got the internet wave, you got the mobile wave, you got the shift to online live services wave in the gaming industry. You caught the XR wave. You've got a bunch of waves.
Yeah, I was an investor in Oculus because I met them Brendan Reeves and I worked together at Gaikai. Yeah, and I have some thoughts about cloud gaming and sort of this next wave of spatial, which we can talk about. But going back to your question, maybe this was a byproduct of being left alone a lot as a little kid because my mom was just a disaster, and she would, and I was the oldest. So I think, the sense of responsibility that I felt for my two younger sisters was, it showed up very early in my life. And maybe it's kind of an anchor for how I lead or what my leadership style is. I use, I'm part Hawaiian. I'm Hawaiian, Chinese, Irish, and Welsh for people who care about that. But, my Hawaiian blood is really strong and it's a really rich culture. And there's a word in Hawaiian, kuleana. It's like a deeply spiritual obligation. And I felt that immediately once I showed up into the life that I have been given. And I think that because I was a little girl who had to figure out how to do hard things, early on I developed that muscle of there's got to be a way to do this. There's got to be a way. If someone else can figure this out, so can I. And before the internet, I would go to the library as a little girl and look up cookbooks and figure out how to teach myself how to cook. And and I was also very fortunate, though. It's not my mother and I, she passed away a few years ago, but we were very good at the end of our lives. But there were also many people who showed up for me in my life, my aunt, Patrick, my grandparents. And, I will say for those of us who've had difficult journeys in the early stage, sometimes they can give us real superpowers as well. And, since things have happened in the past. For my meditation practice taught me that I have agency to choose how I want to look at it, so I can see also my sister, Vicky, who passed away in 2012 from a drug overdose. She couldn't change the narrative. She couldn't shift her mindset beyond the damage that we had experienced. She let it define her, even in the current moment, even though it had, been a while ago. She just couldn't shift her focus in a way that was more empowering. And so I think for me, maybe some of that, there's got to be a way to figure this out. Probably developed during, a real need as a little girl to show up in a bigger way than maybe a lot of other 7-year-olds have to. I never would want anyone to go through what we went through. And certainly there are people who have gone through even worse. But, there is the option for me today to see also how it's all contributed to making me who I am. And, when my mom was dying from lung cancer, we were able to have that very meaningful conversation where she apologized very deeply for what we had been through. But I was also able to really say I wouldn't have traded it for anything because it made me who I am, being her daughter. And it was so empowering, but also very connected for experience for us to be able to have that conversation and sort of let go of the other version of that story and step into a newer version of it.
That's very deep, Nanea. I mean, indeed. Thank you very much. And I think it's tricky now to move the conversation forward.
Oh, no. This is the kind of like Anand and I've talked about this offline where, I've just gotten to a point where I can't live my life without just being like, it's all personal. I hate that statement that when people say it's just business, it's not personal. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, this is your livelihood, right? It's the difference you're making in the world. It's your life. You're spending 10 hours a day doing it. So you bring everything to it, right?
The pattern that I've noticed, just to be able to answer your question, is the best founders and people working to build and change have 3 key ingredients: super resilient.
Yeah.
It's the company's their identity, because the identity is what shapes the company.
Right.
And don't take no for an answer. And we call them cockroach founders, they just persist and survive. Right? I think TRIPP, if you we should get into TRIPP a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. Love to.
The idea of building mental resilience, the idea of I know you don't like the box of meditation, but the practice of mental wellness.
Yes.
And riding the waves of technology, those 3 come together from your life experiences directly into TRIPP, right?
100%. And, I do have a very deep meditation practice. I'll show you. How do I show you this? There's my meditation area. And all around my house, I have little landing pads that I can settle on. So I've been meditating since I was 15.
No, and indeed, I wanted to go now. Thanks also, Anand, for reframing and summarizing, because I think that helps us also move towards an understanding also TRIPP what it is today. And one thing that I was very impressed about is the fact that it's probably one of the app that is most multi-platform. So in the sense that provides several devices on mobile. So I was wondering, how did you decide to be multi-platform so broadly? And also, what advice could you give maybe to other founders who are considering, should we bring on another headset? Should we bring on mobile or not? Maybe can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, that was a key component of our success at Jamdat, was the infrastructure that we built to distribute across platform. And it was painful. But we knew that if we could figure this out, we would win. And ultimately, you know, in the early days of mobile, we were the top, if not one of the top 2 to 3 mobile game companies in the world at that time. So when you look at virtual reality, I knew that we could always get that wow factor and of the novelty to get in and go, wow. But how do we get that a second time? So that informed the way we designed the platform for variability, to update content without pushing an update of the whole client executable itself. And we had to build a lot of infrastructure for that. We also knew that we wanted it to be able to adapt eventually to how we could sense the person was feeling, whether it was through wearable integration or their stated mood, because in mental well-being, that's really important. So that idea of being able to deliver assets from the server in a way that could be to the individual was also part of our early development design in the architecture of the app. But virtual reality is very much VR devices. You have to make a decision that I'm going to sit down, clear my space, put this thing on my head. It's a
super high intent.
Yeah. I mean, you have to. So we knew very, even before we launched, that if we didn't have a mobile app where we could communicate with the person, if we didn't have their email address, we needed our own registration so that we could communicate with them to get them back into our experience, that we were going to fail and that we weren't going to have the replayability. And, you know, today, last month, 37 to 38% of our paying, what we call our premium MAUs, multi-active users, have been using our app 12 months or longer. So that's incredible retention.
Incredible retention. We can talk about this publicly, right? Just making sure.
Yeah. I talk about it publicly. And
incredible best-in-class retention.
Yeah. And, and wellness apps have real retention issues. They'll have a 97% 30-day drop-off. And so even on our mobile app right now, we're benchmarking much higher than that. And we're really encouraged by it. With mobile, you can integrate push notification. You can persist messaging in an inbox. You'll see all those show up in our mobile app. But when we launched on the Oculus, and I say Oculus because it wasn't Meta Quest yet at that point, but when we launched on the Oculus Quest in December of 2019, our mobile app also allowed you to upload your images into the VR experiences. And with that feature, we saw significantly higher engagement. So personalization was really that was our first pitch. I could show you our pitch deck to Mayfield in 2017 when they funded us, that it was always asking, how do you feel? And we would adapt the experiences. And we're finally getting ready to launch that. On mobile in February, we launched Kokua, which is, Kokua is a Hawaiian word for support. And it's our AI agent. And it's been built off of all the mood data that people have submitted. Through our VR application, we built this mood vector database, and we just by launching the beta version of it, which is not even optimized, before bringing it into VR, so we could learn and understand, we've seen 130% increase in our mobile engagement just from February to now. And it was an immediate impact without any marketing. So we're so excited. Sometime in June, we're going to bring it into the Quest platform, and it's we've made it much more interactive. It's the beginning of, now we have the tech foundation to make these experiences start to adapt to who you are and how you feel. And I'm hoping that we see an impact on the engagement as well that in VR that we saw in mobile. So it's super exciting.
I think we just heard a product pre-announce for the first time.
Yes. So
exactly. Stay tuned for June. I think what I'm picking up from what you're saying, Nanea, is the consumer journey on mental wellness and leading a holistically healthy life occurs in multiple points of time during their day.
For sure.
And so VR and headsets and mixed reality, and we should talk about that as well, is one moment when you wake up in the morning. There's an opportunity to set intentions. And it sounds like what you're trying to do is to pursue that custom consumer journey.
Yeah.
The technology follows that, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's more, I think a mistake everyone's making, and going back to mobile, you look at the pattern recognition. When we started Jammed at mobile, I had a Nokia flip phone. I had a Nintendo Game Boy, right? I had an MP3 player. I had a Canon camera. I had a Palm Pilot with this fold-out keyboard. I had a laptop. I had a Texas Instruments calculator. Oftentimes, I would be walking around with all those in a backpack, right? Wherever I went. Now it's all just morphed into something I call my phone. But really what it is mobile computing. I haven't lost my desktop, which, I have in the other room that I play games on. I have a laptop, but now I have a different way to interact with computing that's mobile. And I consume content differently when I'm mobile and out and about. And so I think of that with spatial the same way, that it's not about VR, MR, XR, AR, mobile. There's going to be a confluence into something we call our glasses. And it's going to happen. There are a lot of people who don't believe that, but it will happen. And here's why I believe it will happen. Going back to Gaikai. We learned at Gaikai how to build really thin clients on devices that weren't capable of even rendering the experiences. Part of the reason why I wanted to go work at Gaikai was they came when I was at EA and showed us Crisis being streamed to a very a $60 Android tablet. And I was blown away because if you know anything about video game development, the fact that it felt very real time, they had nailed the latency. And this was in 2008, 2009. It was mind blowing. And it was a precursor to where I think we're at right now. So all this GPU in the cloud infrastructure is being deployed very broadly for low latency AI transactions because AI needs GPU in the cloud. And spatial is going to benefit from that because once you have GPU on the edge, you can have very lightweight glasses that can adapt and modify your vision and correct it in real time, dynamic lenses that can augment the way you see the world around you, how you interact with locations and get more information, how you interact with people and get more information. You're going to be disadvantaged by not having access to that. In many ways, then we're closer to having a brain-computer interface, right? I like the idea of a brain-computer interface that I can take off my head. That's not invasive. But I really do feel that GPU in the cloud is going to be the key driver. And we don't know what that's going to unlock from an innovation standpoint. When we started Jammed at Mobile in the games category, we didn't know that the gig economy would be facilitated through mobile computing, that the influencer economy, that anyone could be a celebrity in that, and now I think the focus is on hyper personalization. Our feeds have already, by having ubiquitous content, our feeds have become hyper-personalized, right? But now the content will become hyper-personalized. And the vision for TRIPP from the beginning of our company was hyper-personalized wellness, to adapt experiences in real time. And this is why we have built our tech stack the way that we have. We have collected data the way that we have. We have inserted a layer of identity management, entitlement management. Part of the reason why we didn't code directly to the PlayStation identity or the Meta, we can interface with it, but in order to facilitate cross-platform, you have to have your own identity system. And to unravel that is a lot of effort. Part of what I did at EA was to unravel that decision so that the game teams could even, connect with the customer on their website as well as on Xbox, So these are really important decisions that companies working in this space, if they really want to build a real business, you have to have a direct relationship with your customer. And we thought about that from the very beginning. It adds a lot more overhead and it adds a lot more infrastructure, right?
There's so much good stuff in there. I think you made some predictions around the next wave that you're seeing I'm pretty sure you're infrastructure to catch it, which is like AI and like GPU in the cloud.
Yep.
So you're going to say something. I'm going to cut you off, right? You're going to say something, Nanea?
No, go ahead.
Okay. You also talked about architecting the product in a way that you can intercept the customer journey regardless. It's adding a little bit of overhead in the process, but you believe the trade is worth it. You also briefly touched about like this idea of hyper-personalization. I mean, each of that could be such a deep topic. Talk to us about, like, I know TRIPP has a lot of focus on like the science of mental wellness, and you have personal experiences there as well. Can you talk us through like, what about the science of mental wellness do people get wrong or people need to get right? That's part one of the question. Second is like, how do you make that happen in TRIPP? Sorry, Gabriel, go ahead.
No, and there was just one when I was doing some research going on the website, there were some incredible papers just on the website, just with scientific institution. So also for everybody listening, please, if this is something you're interested in, go on the website and check, because there are actual scientific publications. So, but Nanea, please, I think we would like to hear from you.
Yeah, and there's even more too if you search. We're conscientious that we don't want to make any medical claims. You need a tremendous amount of evidence to do that. And we do have goals eventually to start working specifically with mental health entities so that we can use our technology stack to personalize for very specific indications. But that's much further out. We really just want to build a great experience, because that will facilitate success even in the mental health place. But it's been really, I've always been very data driven, and I had to be, as a female working in tech. No one would listen to me unless I showed up with a lot of evidence and data. So it was definitely a strategy, but I also found it really interesting because you can try things out. And the data is like having a conversation with your users. They're telling you, they're communicating with you based on what they're doing in the app. And I've just always been really fascinated by that, because it does help you decide what to do next. They're telling you what to do. So just getting something launched like how we did Cocoa on mobile before even evolving it for VR, I love that iterative part of making software. So when, going back to that first time I tried VR down at the Oculus office in Orange County, it was before Facebook bought them, and had that thought, like, what else could you make someone feel? I started doing some research around, the effects of virtual reality. And I saw all these scientists, Walter Greenleaf at Stanford, Skip Rizzo at USC, Jeremy Bailenson, Giuseppe Riva, Kim Bullock, out of Stanford. And it was really exciting. Of course, the devices that they had been working with were cost prohibitive to do anything at scale, but there were indicators that there was something happening there specific to virtual experiences. And that started kind of in reading those research studies around virtual reality and how to use it in healthcare, specifically mental health. And specifically, Giuseppe Riva had some papers early on using awe as a way to shift different mental states. And that seemed like very informative to me around a very native use case with VR, that you can trigger states of awe and wonder very easily with it. And so once I started noodling this idea, and I pitched it. I pitched it to a couple venture firms, and I pitched it to 3, and 2 said, we need to see a prototype, but we're super interested in supporting you. And then Mayfield said, yeah, we'll just give you the money so you can build it. We know who you are. We don't, need to, let's support you. This is awesome. And so I had money, and I went up to Stanford. There was a conference with all these scientists I had read. And, I don't know anything about academia, academic research, but I do know how to build things. That I was very confident in. And I went up there and I met Walter, and Giuseppe Riva gave an amazing talk. I met Skip. I met all these people I had read. And I said to Walter, would you help me do this the right way so it's grounded in research, we can measure it, that we're making the right choices on how we collect data? And he said, no one ever comes to us before they built the thing. They always come to us after they kind of get into trouble.
And then reference the science into the...
Yeah, and it was awesome because...
Never works.
I was super fascinated by it because it took that data dork in me and kind of took it to another level. And so that's how we came up with the instruments in our application of asking you how you feel before and after. After 10 million sessions, we had a very rich data set on how people felt that could be sliced and diced by age, location, demographic, and that's what we built our mood vector database that's now powering Kokua. We also were able to really early on identify that we could detect breath patterns through the IMU, through the head movement, the tracker, but we could also detect heartbeat. And so, but the thing for our brand that I realized was really important, just even asking people, how do you feel? Giving them the agency to turn that off, to opt out of it, to build trust. When we launched our breath detection, we are training our AI models for the kinematic data with de-identified data. We asked people for a separate opt-in, even though legally it's not a biometric data set yet. We wanted people to feel that they were contributing and helping us evolve it. Same with Kokua, right? They can opt out of it. So I think that trust as we expand into this hyper-personalization is a really big factor. I mean, I'm aware that a lot of companies, some of us work really closely with, would have a difficult time asking people, how do you feel, and getting the trust of actually getting a response. And so it's something that we take very, very personally as a team. But it is kind of this next wave. So working with researchers, clinicians, academics, it's super important for us to build that trust. But here's a byproduct of being so broadly available now. Anybody can pick up our app and study it, and that's where all our published data comes from. We have done some direct studies, like we got an NIH grant as a sub-awardee, with Sober Grid on using TRIPP with addiction, but it's been really amazing to see people just study our application and share the results. So I'll just finish up with this. There's a really interesting study I just saw that compared our mobile app to our VR app and the differences. And there's another one that studied our app in VR and compared it to other just computer-based mindfulness content. And so, you start to see the impact of XR itself on mental well-being.
This is like incredibly like insightful. I think for the founders listening out there, there's three things that I picked up. Like one, architect the science and the product in response to the journey you want the customer, you want to be helpful to the customer on.
Right.
Second, a lot of people talk about like, what's your moat? What's your moat? And I think like you would have heard in Nanea's response a bunch of things where you're like, oh, that sounds like really interesting things that is uniquely TRIPP. But notice that she didn't approach it from the perspective of a moat. She was like, where can I add value to the consumer, including like trust, including getting the mood data? And then she architected it backwards. So think value first and what will follow if that's your jam.
Yeah, I totally, I tell my team a lot, don't worry about the business. If we actually build experiences that make people feel better, we're going to be massively successful. Right.
You briefly talked about like awe as a mechanism for like altering mood states. And you talked about like XR doing that really well. And you talked about this comparison between your mobile app and your XR and like the VR app. Like Gabriel, like I'm sure you want to like take this to like specific places. In a nutshell, Nanea, like what about GR or MR, virtual reality? What triggers the awe? What triggers the altered states of mind? Why not get the same thing on mobile or like a laptop? Or like
yeah, I think, again, like I kept saying to our early stage team members, stimulate, don't simulate. And that was really our motto, stimulate, don't simulate. When you get into a simulated environment, your brain's going, oh, it looks like a beach, but it doesn't smell like a beach. It doesn't feel like a beach. You look for what's wrong with it. It's sort of like its own version of Uncanny Valley. And with virtual reality, you can play with scale. You can make someone feel small, which is what cathedrals do, right? You can go, wow, look at this. Like, I could be sitting in a closet, but feel like I'm in this cosmic flotation tank in space. You can play with different movement that can surprise and delight the person where they feel like they're ascending and floating up by how you design the experiences to give them a feeling of like a different sense of embodiment. We can show you your breath instead of telling you to inhale and exhale. Like these are the things that you can do in virtual reality that are very difficult to do in the physical world, so it's this idea of transcendence, ascendance. When I get into altered states of being through my meditation practice, I have similar experiences with a loss of sense of self. I'm talking like, when I go and do deep dive 10 hours a day, you're hacking your consciousness when you do those kind of immersions. With VR, you can get there very quickly, without...
Stimulate, not simulate is such a pithy way to think about it. Then you identify unique things. That's specific to the medium.
Well, and as you're building software, you need these pithy statements. It is kind of an anchor of the Buddhist meditation practice too, to use pithy statements to help you, right? And we can even see in recovery, Alcoholics Anonymous, they have a lot of like these easy does it, first things first, these pithy statements. They're anchors to help you kind of stay focused, right? I have my own personal ones. If someone else can do this, so can I. if someone can figure this out, so can we, right? There's got to be a way. It might not be the original way we think, but let's just start opening the door to looking and experimenting and see what unfolds.
Thank you very much, Nanea. And I mean, at the end, it's indeed about playing with the strength of the medium, right? And we have seen so many people that try just to replicate what is in reality in another environment. And then indeed that leads to, I'm on a beach, but it's not really a beach. So why am I here in the first place?
Right.
That being creative and adding that layer, right, of magic that only VR can enable, I think it's certainly the way to go. And
mixed reality too, right? Like it's an opportunity to surprise and delight. And we did some really interesting rewards interfaces with MR, that like you take care of yourself and then it changes the way the world looks around you, right? Like,
and that's also another interesting, because then you remove your headset and you leave the experience behind, but you cannot deny that you can still see that reward there inside of you, right? Because it's there, it was there in the headset, you remove it, but then you still anchored that value. So I think that is also the power of that.
Well, soon we're going to enable it on the mobile phone too, so you can, so you'll see that come out soon too. I'm dropping a lot of.
Nice. And this also brings me, maybe now we are kind of like driving this towards the end. One thing that I was curious, because you mentioned about, indeed, you gave us a bit of a glimpse of how you see the future evolving of these technologies. But maybe you can kind of like, how do you see mental well-being and technology in the upcoming maybe 3 to 5 years converge? I mean, in the sense you introduced this AI and with the hyper-personalization that seems to add value. And I can totally see that. How you see that along with maybe new devices coming to the market in the next years?
I think we've seen the quantified self really drive a lot of positive behaviors in physical activity. When people can look at data in a way that's empowering to address their sleep. We see that with the Oura Ring. We see workout apps really help us stay the course and use some gamification to support that. I think a lot of gamification in mental health, though, looks like lamification. It can actually make you feel worse because it's constantly putting you on some self-improvement, where we really want people to know there's so much to like be present with that's awesome for you, right? And just even the mere fact that you're taking time to connect to your breath and yourself in this moment is really an act of self-care and self-love. And even if you don't believe it, just the fact that you're doing it should be celebrated, right? And so I want to drive the sea change, or our whole team. When I say I mean all of us, right? We want people to think about their mental and emotional well-being proactively and preemptively. You can't separate the mind from the body. Or maybe you can through some techniques. But we know that if we're mentally not healthy, our physical body will also become unhealthy. And it goes the other way as well. When we have certain physical conditions, it can affect our mental health. So really learning how to support ourselves rather than waiting for some crisis mode or diagnosis in the mental health industry to start taking care of that. We want to help people think of it as just part of health, that mental health is health. And I think technology is a really important toolkit to empower the user in that. So what is the quantified inner self? What does that look like? And we have all these data streams with the ability to analyze stress levels through voice, through pupil changes. Like, we can use this data in a way that empowers the user. It has to be done responsibly, though, so that they feel that they have sovereignty over their own data, that it's not being used in ways that are harmful as well. And so that, to me, is the big opportunity here, is how do we give people a sense that they have agency over how they feel, that if you feel triggered by something externally, that you can actually have the training to pause and choose your next reaction to it. That will make us better citizens, better parents, better partners, better co-workers. It'll have this huge impact on the world around us. And I want to use augmented reality to kind of visualize that. So that's something you're going to see us scale our mobile app out in ways, and use mixed reality devices in ways that kind of show the impact of your self-care.
Wow. On that note of becoming better people with better humans, this has definitely been a very, very different episode than we had anything before. And I think partly it's because, not partly, it's wholly because of who we have on the show. You're getting you're getting a 10% visibility into Nanea. If you get the chance to meet her, you will get another 10%, and the layers keep going. But thank you for bringing your whole self.
Yeah, thank you.
Always.
And thank you for all the support you do, for founders like me, and, helping pioneer this space. It's not an easy journey, bringing an idea, having an idea, and just even making it happen. And everyone doing it, especially in this category of XR, we've had a lot of fits and starts. And so we need advocates like yourselves to help us build this. But I feel very optimistic. I can see a spatial transition happening right now that's going to be big. And it's very much reminiscent of mobile, and how a lot of people said, oh, that's not going to happen. And here we are.
Wow.
Yeah.
If you're an investor listening in and you've said no to an XR founder this week, send them an email back again today and say you want to talk.
Yeah.
Okay. and Nanea's pointing to herself, so get in early.
Get in early while you can. We're going to hit a home run. All right.
It is really important. We usually close the show with 3 big takeaways for founders and audience, Nanea. So let me try to capture the 3, and you tell us if those are the right 3 or not. The first thing I picked up was you are the author of your experiences. Your failures don't have to define you. And thank you for sharing vulnerably your life story. And I think it's really brave. And thank you for inspiring all of us here with the work you do. But you don't have to be, you can write your own narrative. That was one. The second thing was, whatever you're building, follow the value of the consumer's journey and then build against it, as opposed to flip it the other way around, which I thought was very powerful. And the last bit is, when building for the next wave, stimulate, not simulate. Right? Those are 3 things I took away. Did we miss anything, Gabriel, Nanea?
I think there was so much, so I invite actually everybody to go back and re-listen it, because there was no way that we would ever summarize this in 3 points. So, Nanea, thank you very much.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure to start my day connecting with you both. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everybody.